Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be reacting to 12 things not to do in Japan. I met so many people who told me, oh, I wanna go to Japan. Japan is one of the country I wanna visit in the future, but there are things you don't wanna do in Japan. So I hope this video will help you to understand our culture. If you like my video, please subscribe and like this video. Then if you have anything you want me to talk about, please leave comments to my channel. Alright, let's get started.
So walking down the street whilst eating and drinking isn't illegal. You're not going to get shouted at and you're not going to get arrested by Ace Detective Sherlock Bones. But what you will get is the stare of disapproval. A lot of people don't know this one until you get here and never see anyone doing it. What you'll find is if someone wants to eat or drink something quickly outside, they'll buy it at the convenience store and then eat it or drink it out the front. Same with vending machines. If they buy something from the vending machine, they'll drink it there and then next to the vending machine. The main reason is people are very conscious about keeping the streets clean here. And you don't want to ruin someone else's day by having them walk through your spilled coffee. That said, all you need to do to avoid the stare of disapproval is just stop and eat and drink whatever it is there and then. Maybe it's on a bench, maybe you're just standing at the side of the road, whatever. Just don't walk whilst eating and drinking and you'll be alright.
So I would say this rule is not that strict. In Japan we are allowed to drink alcohol in public, so you will see so many people drinking while they are walking. Then if you could come to Japan one day, actually this is something you should do. Enjoy having food and drink while you are walking around in the city you are traveling. But it's kinda rude to do this in the stores and trains, so just keep it in mind. So let's go next.
Three things to point out here. Number one, never put your chopsticks upright into the rice, as this is part of a ritual conducted at funerals when offering rice to the spirits of the deceased. Similarly, number two, never pass things from chopstick to chopstick, because again, this is done during funerals to pass the bones of cremated relatives. So that kind of imagery doesn't go down well over dinner, as you'd expect. Probably best not to conjure up imagery surrounding death before you've even had your lunch. Thirdly, don't do the rubbing of the chopsticks. You know when you open wooden chopsticks, you like to do that to get rid of the splinters, just because it's fun. Everyone loves doing that, right? But don't do it in Japan because it's seen as rude to the owner, because you're basically saying, oh, your chopsticks are probably cheap, which, let's face it, they probably are. But in fact, they usually definitely are.
So the first two things he was talking about chopsticks are true. You do not want to do that when you are using chopsticks, because those two things are considered as so rude in Japan. Like he was talking about when we have funeral, we put rice next to the person who died. Then also we put chopsticks in the rice like this. So that's why when you are using chopstick to eat something, you don't want to put them in the middle of whatever you are eating. So let's move on.
Probably the greatest thing about Japan ever, and the reason that I eat out several times a week, just because I save 20% automatically. In Japan, it's believed that customer service should always be exceptional, with staff giving 120% every time. 120%? 110%, 120% would be ridiculous. But it's not necessarily rude to tip someone, it just creates this awkward situation where the worker, the staff would feel like you're assessing their performance and they could potentially lose face. So you might think you're being nice by giving someone a tip, but you're not. You're just creating an uncomfortable situation for the worker and they'll probably just reject your tip outright. So don't be tempted to do it.
So this is true. When you go to restaurants in Japan, most likely you will get good customer service and you won't need to give them. I think this is good for you when you visit Japan. You can just save money and you can use it to get more food. So just like when you visit Japan, don't eat too much So let's go next.
There's a real emphasis on being mindful when you're using public transport in Japan that's often completely absent in many countries. Numerous of the times that I've been riding a train in the UK and someone nearby has been screaming at their partner down the phone, and I felt like I was part of the argument, like some kind of unpleasant 4D experience. But given Japan's density, it's especially important to be mindful when you're stuffed in a train alongside fellow commuters, many of whom are sleeping as well. With that in mind, don't ever talk on your phone on the train. That's a massive, no thing to do here. And even talking loudly is looked down upon. If you're on a local train or a subway train and you get a phone call, just ignore it until you get off. And if you're on a bullet train, you can go to the little compartment in between the carriages and take your call there.
Yeah, when you visit Japan, this is something you don't want to do, talking on the phone when you are on the train, especially if you are a foreigner. First of all, like talking on the phone in the train is considered as rude in Japan. Then if you're a foreigner, we Japanese would think, oh, this guy or this person doesn't know anything about Japan, even though he's in Japan. Maybe you are bothering people, Japanese, then they might think, if you can't follow our culture, get out of Japan, you can go back to wherever you came from. So maybe this is something people would think about you. So don't talk on the phone in the train in Japan. So let's move on.
I remember for the first few years that I lived here, whenever someone handed me a business card, I was utterly terrified because until then, business cards to me had always just been a bit of paper, a bit of card with some writing on. But in Japan, they are so much more. Once you've exchanged business cards, the trick is to imagine you've just been handed the lost treasure of El Salvador or something. First, study it meticulously, the name, the job position, the details, and then either put it in your business card holder or just put it on the desk if you're at a business meeting. Just put it on the table. Never play around with business cards or put them in your back pocket because they're seen as a physical extension of the person themselves, and you don't want to stuff somebody's physical extension down your back pocket. If you're doing business in Japan, always carry business cards. You don't want to be that awkward foreigner who stood there writing out their name and number 50 times in 1 hour on the back of a tissue. And for the record, I am usually that awkward foreigner scribbling down my details because I do forget to bring them, and subsequently I hate myself when it happens.
So this is common things to do when you meet someone new for business in Japan. So business cards used to be very useful back then because we didn't have phone, right? Then we are using business cards to remember you. Then we just still have the tradition up to now. I think just people think it's really important to keep the business card with you. To be honest, I don't really know about this. I'm still a student, but I know like if you wanna be a successful business person in Japan, you better keep it instead of throwing it away. So let's move on.
If you've got a runny nose, standard procedure here is just to keep sniffing, or just to find a toilet or a broom cupboard to hide in. Blowing noses in public is pretty rude. Interestingly though, handkerchiefs are pretty popular here, not in the way you would think though. People use them to wipe sweat off in the hot summer weather, or even more commonly to dry their hands in public toilets. Because surprisingly, many public toilets in Japan don't have any hand drying facilities, despite having space-age toilets that reside in the same room. It's quite a weird contrast that I don't quite understand.
So yeah, blowing in nose in public, it's something like maybe you don't wanna do. I just think people don't like blowing their nose in public or in front of someone because the sound of you are making when you are blowing your nose is kind of disgusting to us. But you can still do it. I do it. Just don't make it like awkward. But obviously, if you are visiting Japan right now or like you are visiting Japan anytime soon, don't do it because of obvious reason. You know, now we have like COVID, So just be careful. Let's go next.
Physical contact in Japan isn't really a thing. You'll bow a lot, you'll nod enthusiastically daily, but occasionally you might shake hands with someone if they're a good friend or a business client that you get on well with, but generally I avoid it unless someone makes the first move, and hugging in particular doesn't go down well. It's just met with expressions of awkwardness and despair. And also amongst couples, public displays of affection are phenomenally rare here, so don't be surprised if you get the stare of disapproval if you're kissing your partner frantically in the street. And I think
Yes, this is true. We have like a totally different culture when it comes to physical contact for greeting. I think it's because like we have like different personal distance, like where we get comfortable. When you are shaking hands or when you can give a hug to someone, it's totally depends on the situation. But I think bowing to someone like this is not gonna make you get in trouble. Hug or kissing on cheeks are not preferable. Just don't do it in Japan. Also, kissing to your partner in public is considered as kind of weird things in Japan, but this just applies to Japanese. When we see foreigners are kissing to their partner, we understand that's your culture. So I think that's totally fine for you. Let's move on.
that it should definitely be this. If you're the sort of person who feels the need to have a debate or an argument about things or throw your opinions out there constantly, people will find you obnoxious and dislikable and probably just avoid you. Embedded heavily within the culture is this idea of keeping harmony and avoiding conflict at all costs. And it's a lot easier to do that when people aren't at each other's throats, throwing around opinions. Sometimes it can be frustrating when people are just unwilling to speak their minds or give you a clear yes or no answer. I mean, one time, one of my colleagues when I was teaching, I asked him, do you have any pets? And he said to me, maybe my cat is dead. Maybe your cat is dead. What does that mean? It is dead or is it not dead? It's not Schrodinger's cat, is it? It turned out the cat was definitely dead, but he was just the sort of person that always liked to use the word maybe and just not express certainty. But if there's one reason I've never seen a fight anywhere in Japan in the last 5 years, it's probably this reason. That people are a lot more careful about expressing their opinions and holding back what they really think.
So this is true. Like, I think Japanese people are hesitant to give an honest opinion. That's why we always use like maybe. Like, maybe I wanna do this or maybe not. It looks like we are kinda indecisive, but like all the time we have our own idea in my mind. But like he said in the video, we don't wanna have any conflict with anyone. We always try to listen to other people's idea. Then we usually try not to make the other person feel uncomfortable. But I wouldn't say everyone is like this. Personally, I am not like this. I just say what I think. Also, I just do what I wanna do. So just remember, everyone is not like this. Okay, let's go next.
Yeah, I couldn't be bothered to film that one. Everyone seems to know this one already anyway. When visiting someone's house or entering a public building like a school or going to a hot spring, you take off your shoes and switch to slippers before you go in. The easiest way of knowing if you have to change your shoes is there'll be a change in elevation in the floor. So when you go in, there'll be a little stair, and that's when you know. This is the one thing on the list where failing to stick to the rules will have noticeable results. A few years ago, a friend and I visited a public bathhouse in Kyoto, and we went in, and you're supposed to take your shoes off. For some reason he didn't, I don't know why, I don't think he noticed or saw. There was a little old woman sitting behind the entrance counter where you kind of pay, and when we walked in, she saw that he still had his shoes on, and she shot up with terrifying energy and ran over and grabbed him and took him to the front and was like, get your shoes off, get your shoes off. And that image has stayed burnt into my mind. This quiet little old woman suddenly becoming so alive and animated by this terrible event. And ever since then, I've never forgotten to take my shoes off when entering the building.
So this is absolutely true. Also, I think that's a funny story. I just liked it. So the idea of taking off shoes before you get into someone's house in Japan, I think it comes from the way we live. Long time ago, before we knew like European culture, we used to sit and sleep on the floor in the house, so we had to keep the floor clean, right? I think that's why we take off shoes and we still sit on the floor. Then some people still use like a futon to sleep on the floor. I think that's why we take off shoes. Okay, let's move on.
For whatever reason, rubbish bins and trash cans are disturbingly rare in Japan. Outside of convenience stores, it can be a nightmare to find one. And the reason I put this on the list is because so many people, so many of you guys message me on Twitter saying, I'm in Tokyo and I can't find a bin, what should I do? I've wandered through Tokyo for up to 20 minutes sometimes, just in search of a bin and can't find one. The streets though, despite that, are shockingly clean here because people, if they can't find a bin, they just take the rubbish home with them. It can feel like some kind of mini game sometimes, going in search for a bin, because when you do find a bin you feel a real sense of achievement. But despite that, don't be tempted to litter, just keep trying and you'll find a bin one day.
So, like he was talking about trash can. I don't think this is gonna bother you when you visit Japan. I know it's kinda hard to find garbage can in Japan, but you can find convenience stores everywhere. Then usually convenience stores have garbage can inside, so anywhere you go you should find convenience store, then you can find garbage can. That's why I don't think like this is gonna bother you when you visit Japan. So let's move on.
Seems like a fairly obvious addition to the list, and yet in the UK we just cross the street whenever the hell we want, whenever there's an opening in traffic, as opposed to waiting for the green line, same as many countries. In Japan, however, people do not cross the road on a red light. It's incredibly rare, and it's one of the greatest ways of seeing this sense of order and obedience to the law that exists in Japan. If you stand at a roadside in Japan and there's no cars coming, you can't see any cars whatsoever, people still will not cross the road until it goes green. Over the years of the many friends I've had come to visit me here, this is the thing that shocks them the most. The idea of not crossing the street when there's no visible cars there. The idea of abiding by a rule that doesn't seem necessary. And yet for me personally, the main reason I abide by it is after a few years of being here, you don't want to stand out, you don't want to be this stereotypical rule-breaking foreigner. And as well as that, you don't want to run the risk of getting caught out by the police. So those are two things worth taking into consideration before you dash across the seemingly empty road. And the last one, don't worry about not knowing anything about Japanese etiquette when you can.
I think this is because Japanese people are more conservative. We tend to follow what people do. If no one is crossing the street when the light is red, why would you do it? We would think just wait on the light to turn blue like other people do. So even if you find something productive or beneficial to do in Japan, you shouldn't do that unless Japanese people are doing that. Okay, I think next is gonna be the last one.
Come to Japan. As I said earlier in this video, there aren't going to be any real consequences to not following any of these things, apart from maybe the footwear one. That's quite scary. You don't want to get dragged off by another woman. The reason I say don't worry too much is because I find a lot of people come here and they're very nervous and very anxious about following the etiquette they don't really comprehend. And that includes even me. When I came here, I didn't know anything. And I was constantly anxious and nervous that I was making mistakes. But really, as a foreigner in Japan, you get kind of a free pass to make mistakes. People are understanding and they're kind and they will let you off. So don't become too nervous about following all the rules. Do your best, but don't become a nervous wreck. So those are my 12 things.
Like he said, if you are visiting Japan or someday if you visit Japan, Don't worry about not knowing anything about Japanese culture. This is totally fine, I think. We understand that you just don't know about our culture. Japanese people are so nice to foreigners. We love foreigners. They might tell you what's the right way to do when you made a mistake. So don't be nervous or shy if you could come to Japan one day. We just like so happy to have foreigners in Japan, then also like really like talking to foreigners. So if you come to Japan, maybe you just like talk to them like how are you, like where you're from, like what kind of restaurant should I go, something like that. Don't hesitate to talk to them. We've already talked about 12 things not to do in Japan. Hopefully like this video helped you understand our culture, so get like some idea about how you should like behave in Japan. Thank you for watching my video. If you have like anything you want me to talk about Japan or America, because I'm in the US now as a Japanese student, so just like let me know. You can leave comments or you can go to my Twitter. So if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also please like this video. Hope I can see you in the next video. Alright, see you.